Okay. So, very briefly, I want to take you through some other animals and how their circulatory systems work, because this might seem kind of like the wall, but there's actually a lot of interesting things that you can learn that looked like a weird alien to me when I looked at it just a second ago. This looked like the body and the neck and like a head with an eye and a proboscis going down. These are its legs, and it's kind of like eating something off the ground. Anyhow, beside the point. So, fish. Fish are not built the same way as you are. Now, as an aside, one of the things that I think are important to understand how things work. It's really good to understand why they work the way they work. And that means that you don't necessarily have to understand all the bits and pieces. How humans are put together, how anything is put together, makes more sense if you can put it into the framework of why does it work the way that works. And then it's easier to remember than all the bits and pieces of how it works. So we're going to put this into context and talk about circulatory systems of a lot of different animals for a few minutes and talk about why it is that they work the way that they work. So this is a diagram of how fish work. They have a two-chambered heart. They have one atrium, they have one ventricle. Blood comes into it, it goes through the atrium, goes through the ventricle, then it goes out deoxygenated to the gills. It goes to the gills, picks up oxygen, and it immediately then goes through a portal vein out to the body, and it goes out through the body, delivers that oxygen, picks up carbon dioxide and waste, and then goes back to the heart and then comes back around. Okay. So, could you have a system like this? Say no.
I actually don't know why.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Sid?
Well, I mean, I have thoughts, but then it doesn't make sense because fish can do it. But like, once you, like, your capillaries are like pretty low pressure, right?
Mm-hmm. In fact, they're high resistance, and so anything after them is very low pressure.
Yeah. So like, once you like go through your lungs, like pick up all that oxygen, then like there's no pressure to like push it to the rest of your body.
Yes, exactly. What's that?
Just a little why, and they just
Yeah, so
do
then
this
how?
calculating the deal.
That's a very good question, because they're more like you laying down, and they're in water where there's a lot of hydrostatic pressure on them. And so it actually it's fine for them, because this coming out of the gills doesn't have to be that high pressure, because of both their body construction and the environment that they're in. But then also, not only because of the environment, but then it just limits also their top end performance. Like there is a limit to how high a fish could jump. It's a weird thing to say, but like they're not as high metabolic performers as a lot of other things, but they would need to be as well. So this limits them, but in their environment it works out okay. But here you have this problem, is that you go through your respiratory capillary beds and then you drop pressure, and then you never have high pressure again to deliver out to the bodies. Okay, so move on to amphibians. Well, just as kind of an example, this is like a teleost fish heart where you have the atria right here. So you have a sinus. You have an atrium right here. It comes into the ventricle, the parotid ventricle. The ventricle pushes it out into the aorta, and that is it almost looks like a one-chamber heart, because the ventricle, like the atrium and the ventricle are so separate here. The ventricle is really the only big muscular thing. This is an elasmobranch heart, is a little bit more put together into one thing. You have a more muscular atrium. You have a very muscular ventricle. It gives them higher performance. Like they're going out and a lot more active than other things, but still not like land-dwelling animals. This is an amphibian heart. This is essentially a diagram of the amphibian heart. Now you have solved the problem here. Your problem solved is, hey, you're now pushing blood out to the body at high pressure. Isn't that great? Look at that. We're going out both places. So instead of just having like, as we were before, back here, we're losing pressure. We just split this and bypass. There's a simple change. Essentially, we're just bypassing the gills on one of our circuits, or the lungs, depending on which kind of amphibian you are. We just have this little shunt bypassing that and going straight to the body, so it's under pressure now. And, well, now we have two different circuits come back in, so we need another atrium. So we have two atria, but then still one ventricle. What's the downside of this? Yeah. Yes, exactly. The blood's less oxygenated now. We're mixing deoxygenated blood from the body with oxygenated blood from the gill, and it mixes in here, and now we have kind of like semi-oxygenated going out both places. Yes?
Methods only work with flow therms.
What's that?
These sorts of methods only work with flow therms because of the way they get cold blood. Like, is temperature a factor?
Kind of. In that this becomes not your limiter of metabolic rate. Other things are limiting your metabolic rate.
Okay.
And so this does not become the limiting
So
step.
the amount of oxygen is not the limiting
Yes.
metabolic factor.
Yes. Same thing with the fish. Like, your blood pressure is not the limiter. Other things are already limiting it. So this works fine because it at least meets your metabolic demand. Same thing here. This at least meets your metabolic demand because you're cold-blooded, you're slow, and so this works just fine. It doesn't work fine when you become warm blood and higher metabolic rates. Yeah. So yes, that plays into it. And so this is an example of an amphibian heart. You're mixing blood here. So like it comes through here, you have one ventricle still, two atria, and then it mixes in here, but now you're splitting it up going two different ways. You have one set going to the lungs or to the gills, another set going down to the body. One thing that's actually a little bit deceptive here is that many amphibians actually exchange gases in their skin. So this actually isn't even coming back all the way deoxygenated either, because going out to their body actually picks up some oxygen as it's going through their skin. And so this is not coming back completely deoxygenated like what your blood would come back in the venous system. Here you go, coming back, mixing, and then going out two different directions from a single ventricle. We have one step up from that. Reptiles have a slight modification to this in which they have a partial septum in the ventricle. You still have only one ventricle, but what happens is this partial septum, essentially, as blood comes in one side, it keeps it on this side. As blood comes in this other side, it keeps it on that side, so you don't have complete mixing. Essentially, it uses the flow to keep them somewhat separate and then send them off. So, in this case, it improves on that in that we have blood going off here that's kind of oxygenated. More so, but it's more oxygenated than the blood going off to the lungs. It's not still not completely separated. This actually works pretty well. Like, this is pretty oxygenated. This is not. It's pretty not oxygenated, so it does a pretty good job. I had to have a little. I was googling reptile hearts and I came over this. I was like, that's cool. But here you go. This is essentially how this works. You have this partial septum that comes up. You actually do get mixing, especially because it's not like a simple like we're just flowing straight through. Like this makes it look like, hey, it's flowing straight through, and it could get really good separation. But you're actually not doing that. You're not coming around and doing this. Still, the septum does a really good job of keeping that somewhat separated. You have an improvement. Okay. Yes, Megan.
Why would you want why not just have a mixture?
Well, you don't necessarily want that mixture, but there's no, like, because this isn't the limiter on their metabolic rate, there's not like a lot of selective pressure to completely close it off. Like, because you don't need to. Which brings us to the Bourbon Heart, in which case here, is just completely separate each way. You have a heart that has four chambers, and so you keep this completely separate. It's just a complete circuit going back and forth, and so you're completing the oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood completely separate. You've also solved the problem of pressure, that after it comes out of the blood or the lungs low pressure, you repressurize it before you send it out to the body. Yeah.
You said vertebrate heart?
Excuse me, mammalian heart and bird heart. So yeah, I meant mammalian. Thank you. Just really quick, because cephalopods do this really cool. They have solved the same problem. They're not like fish, they're more like you. But they do it in like a completely crazy way. They have solved the problem of keeping both circuits completely separate, but they also keep them pressurized. Instead of doing this with more chambers on the heart, they do this simply with more hearts. Like, let's make more hearts instead of making more chambers on the heart. In this case, what happens, you have a systemic heart that sends out to the body. It comes out low pressure, but instead of going back to that central heart, it goes out to the gills that each have their own heart on them. It pressurizes, these bronchial hearts then pressurize the blood going through the gills. So you get pressurized blood going through the gills, drops pressure, and then comes back to another heart, the systemic heart, that then repressurizes, goes back out to the body. So cephalopods, octopuses, squid, cuttlefish, have solved the exact same problem, got to a system that has performance that is comparable to a mammalian heart, or a mammalian system, but they just do it in a completely different way. We're not making more chambers on our heart, we're just like making more hearts and then putting them different places in the animal to pressurize them in specific ways. Yeah?
So if like, you know, like if you shoot a person in the machine, the heart is not there. But like if you the heart or the lungs could it potentially be
Like if you lose the bronchial heart here, yeah, they can go with one bronchial heart, but you would only lose one bronchial heart. You couldn't lose a systemic heart. Like that's going to put you out of commission. Or if you lose both bronchial hearts, you're out of commission. So, okay.